the minister's directive deals with three separate items. The first is the filling of posts in the intelligence division. The second one, ports of entry. And the third one, political killings task team. Now, the Minister Nkunu, when he gave evidence to the Honourable Committee, mentioned amongst others, he had about 5 or 6 other reasons that informed his decision of 31 December. Your comment?
Well, I mean, I read very quickly through the his the affidavit he made. I was particularly interested in what I could gather from the cases he mentioned, which are quite obscure still. But I think he had been, my recollection is that he had been through various procedures. I know there was a media report several months back that General Masemola had actually been told that we couldn't afford to, the country couldn't afford to keep this expensive unit going, and I think my role in this is to say it wasn't necessary because we had perfectly good provincial teams, which I have explained, I've given details to. And I had never in my life, in all the years I've kind of worked with police, we've often cooperated. I've put them in touch with people when they're investigating, including back in the 90s. And I have never in my life heard of a task team running around with members of National Intervention Unit. What the police do, if they have to go into an area they think might be dangerous, they sign for a rifle to take with them in case they come under attack. And here I was getting, I think the first one I heard that were national intervention was when they seized Tabiso Zulu's phones. And then I heard that regularly the National Intervention Unit is with them. Now I can tell you, and this is one of my arguments, that at the moment we've got trucking mafias, we've got land and housing mafias invading land which is interdicted by armed men, and there's not a sign. There's no sign of a national intervention unit or a public order unit. And they're running around with the task team, staying in expensive hotels. I then was told that actually a member who was a captain and promoted to lieutenant colonel, who by the surname of Finn, who's named by people in the task team, is actually cooperating the unit with General Dumisani Khumalo. He's kind of one of the commanders. Now that means then that we have the only people with oversight of a detective team are the National Commissioner, the Provincial Commissioner, the seconded NIU person, and General Khumalo, who's also head of intelligence. Now, that means there's 4 people there who are operational response and not even detectives running a team. I mean, it's just crazy. Absolutely. I've never come across this before. So that was the story of, I did write that letter, yes, and I wrote the subsequent letters because I was horrified by what I was hearing, and I thought of the expense even then. I would hear, well, who's so-and-so? I'd ask a detective that used to work in the I think he was with us and he's gone and he got promoted now. That's why he's now a colonel. But so I was getting reports from different people. When you put it together, it was all grossly irregular, plus my own experience of, as I said, the way they were running around. And I wasn't just told this by people who were accused, I was told it by families who'd seen them in court. And this year there was even a report, it's not in your bundle, I think, but after the disbandment, the National Intervention was still in court for Dlamini's case, I think it was, and others. And they prevented family members from entering the court. I've got a whole lot of statements about it from them. So they were still running around. And that's why then after I sent the initial complaint, and I want to stress I never thought the minister would act. I've never had ministers acting when I've asked them to do things before.
So just before we get there, Dr. Das, did Minister Munu respond, reply
No.
to your...
But the letters went through. He never responded. As far as I know, I never got even, but I did send them to his office and they didn't bounce back. So I was assuming that he had received them.
Now, while we talking about Minister Mkhunu, can you just reference from paragraph 24 on page 16 to 26 on page 17, any interaction, relationship, contact with Minister Mkhunu?
Yeah. I was asked to do this and I want to do it because people are saying it was me who drove it and wrote the letter, which is nonsense. Let me just explain my history. When I was interacting with a lot of ANC people in the early 90s because they wanted to know what was happening, Professor Zulu and I were still producing reports. I've mentioned to you there were specific people, but Senzo Mkhunu was not one of them. There was Willis Mkhunu, who was a trade unionist, who became the premier of the province, but not Senzo Mkhunu, I think, at that stage. And the area he came from, he'd been under threat, I gathered, from... I was working very closely with Roy Ainsley, who was up the North Coast a lot. And he was doing the area that Senzo Mkhunu was in, and he was under threat. But it wasn't as badly as attacked as the areas I was working, which had a lot of trade unionists in. And he seems to have been in another role. I didn't deal with him then, but I probably met him at some stage. I remember a conversation I had with him in the 2004 elections when he had asked me to supply him with what was happening, problems at polling stations, because in those days, and it was very contested. That was the first election the ANC won in the province. And there was a lot of intimidation, were the police there? Were the police doing their jobs? I was phoning him and telling him, well, there's a problem at this station, that station. That was the conversation. He was quite grateful for it. He thanked me. And that's the only connection, the only conversation. I must have met him at some stage because I was always getting asked to do things like, opinions on traditional leadership and all sorts of things. And I must have met him. I probably met him when the ANC won the province. They had a huge gathering then. Paulus and I were at it. Shamila Batoy was at it. There were lots of people at it, and I probably met him then. And but I don't remember him specifically. But I had his phone number. I had his phone number in a book from years ago. I think a book from the 90s probably, or early 2000s. But when he was appointed minister, and I thought, well, I need to send him stuff now. I can't send it Clearly because Clearly was the one that was causing the problems. And I was writing to Parliament about it. And the president, I might have even written to the president at some stage about the problems, especially about Thabiso Zulu, because, of course, Clearly wouldn't give him protection. Anyway, but I then phoned somebody in the ANC and said, have you got Senzo Mkhunu's number? And he said, well, here it is. And I found out it was the same number I had in my notebook for many years ago. Okay. So I sent him a text message. Or it might have even been a WhatsApp, I can't remember. But I noticed that with his WhatsApps, he does turn on disappearing messages, so I can't remember what I sent. But I sent him a message, and I said, please, could you give me the number of your PA? I would like to send you copies of letters to the police. And he sent the number of his PA. I think she was called Mtembu. That was the only contact I had with him before I wrote the letters. And then after I wrote the letters, I had no contact with him until a month ago. What is it now? End of November? About a month ago, maybe a bit more. I got a call from one of the really good police that I've been working with for a few years. He's based nationally. And he has lots of information. He was in the police for a long time. He gets it. I've noticed a lot of these police get their colleagues' information. He knows a lot. He said, I really need to get hold of Minister Mqunu. Can you let me know how to get hold of him? I said, well, I don't want to, I never give people's telephone numbers without their permission. He said, it's really urgent. He needs to know this. Okay, so I then phone Mqunu. This is about a month ago or more. The line is bad. I'm not hearing him too well. I say, look, I have a policeman who wants to give you information. How should he do it? And he sent me the name in a message. He sent me the name of somebody that I could contact to give the information to, or put him in touch with this policeman. I did phone this, no, I contacted this person and I gave him the information, which he said he would pass to the minister. Now, I didn't know the man that I interacted with. So what I did was, to be on the safe side, I sent the information to Advocate Pekole, because I knew he wasn't, I presumed he wasn't anymore in the office of the minister, because there was a new minister by then. But I thought, well, at least he's a